My father had just turned 81 years old and he still mowed his own lawn. That was the kind of man he was, stubborn in the best possible way. He'd lived alone in that house in Dayton for 6 years since my mother passed, and every time I tried to bring up assisted living or even just hiring someone to help around the place, he'd wave his hand like I was speaking nonsense. "I'm fine, son. I've been fine. Stop fussing." I believed him mostly because I wanted to. That Friday night in March, my wife Renee and I were at her sister's birthday dinner, a restaurant downtown, one of those places where the bread costs $12 and nobody bats an eye. Renee had been looking forward to it for weeks. New dress, hair done, the whole thing. I wasn't going to ruin that for her. My phone buzzed around 7:30. I looked down and saw Dad's name. I stepped away from the table, out past the bar, into the little alcove near the restrooms where it was quiet enough to hear. "Hey, Dad, what's going on?" His voice was off. Not panicked, my father didn't panic, but tight, controlled in a way that told me he was working to keep it that way. "I don't want to make a big thing," he said, "but I've had some chest tightness for about an hour. Left arm feels a little funny." I was already moving back toward the table. "Don't move, I'm coming." "Your car's in the shop," he said. I remembered that. He was right. My Tahoe had been at the dealership since Wednesday. Something with the transmission. They'd said Monday at the earliest. "I'll figure it out," I told him. "Just stay put. Sit down. Don't do anything. I'm calling you back in 2 minutes." I got back to the table. Renee looked up, read my face, and set down her fork. "My dad," I said. "Chest pain, I need your car." She looked at me for a moment. Then she looked at her sister across the table, then back at me. "We just ordered," she said. "Renee. He said his left arm feels numb. Can't you call 911? He's asking me to come. He doesn't want an ambulance. You know how he is about hospitals. He'll fight them the whole way and stress himself out worse. I just need the car. I can be there in 20 minutes. She picked up her wine glass, took a slow sip. "I don't want to be stranded here," she said. "We drove together. How am I supposed to get home?" "Take a cab. Take an Uber. Your sister is right there. She can drive you. This is Melissa's birthday. Dad might be having a heart attack." The table went quiet. Melissa was looking at her plate. Her husband was looking at the wall. One of those silences where everyone in earshot has suddenly found something very interesting to study. Renee leaned forward slightly. "I'm sure it's nothing. He's always calling you over something. Last month, it was the water heater." I stood there for a second, just 1 second, because I needed to make sure I'd heard her right. "Give me the keys," I said. "I'm not giving you the keys. I need to get home tonight." I looked at her. I looked at this woman I had been married to for 19 years. This woman who had sat at my father's Thanksgiving table every year, who had let him babysit our kids when they were small, who had accepted every birthday card and Christmas check he'd sent without fail since the day we got married. "Figure it out," she said. Not loud, almost quiet. "You're a grown man. Call someone." I walked away from the table. I didn't say another word to her. I went outside, stood on the sidewalk in the cold, and called my buddy Pete from down the street. Pete, who I've known since we coached Little League together in 2009. Pete, who answered on the second ring. "I need a favor," I said. "Name it." 12 minutes later, he pulled up in front of the restaurant in his F-150. I got in and we drove to Dayton. I called my dad on the way. He was still sitting in his recliner, still breathing. He said the tightness hadn't gotten worse, but it hadn't gone away either. I told him to unlock the front door and I'd be there soon. Pete waited outside while I went in. Dad was in the living room with the TV on, sound low, some old Western playing that he probably wasn't actually watching. He looked smaller than I remembered, not in a bad way, just the way parents look when you're worried about them, like the fear makes you see things differently. "I told you not to make a fuss," he said. "You told me your left arm was numb. It's better now. We're going to the ER anyway." He didn't fight me on it. That was how I knew he was actually scared. The drive to Miami Valley Hospital was 15 minutes. Pete dropped us at the entrance and said he'd park and wait. I told him he didn't have to do that. He told me to shut up. They took my father back within 10 minutes of us arriving. EKG, blood work, the whole workup. I sat in the waiting room in the clothes I'd worn to dinner, dress shirt, slacks, and watched the ceiling-mounted TV cycle through a home improvement show on mute with the captions on. The waiting room was mostly empty that time of night. A young woman with a toddler on her lap, both of them asleep across 2 chairs. An older man in a Bengals cap staring at his phone, me. Pete came in around 9 and sat down next to me. He didn't say much. Handed me a coffee he'd gotten from the vending machine near the elevators. It tasted like hot brown water. I drank every drop. Around 9:45, a doctor came out. Dr. Okafor, young, calm, clear eyes. She said it wasn't a full cardiac event, but his EKG showed some irregular patterns they wanted to watch. They were going to keep him overnight, possibly into the weekend. He was stable. I could go back and see him. I sat with my dad for about an hour. He had his glasses on and he was already arguing with the nurse about whether he really needed to sleep there. She handled him beautifully. I could tell she'd dealt with stubborn men before. When he finally settled down and his eyes got heavy, I leaned over and told him I'd be back first thing in the morning. He patted my hand once the way he used to when I was a kid and scared of something, like the gesture still meant what it always meant. I'll be fine. You'll be fine. We're fine. I walked out to the parking lot and Pete drove me home. He dropped me off around 11:30. I thanked him. He said don't mention it. I meant to buy him dinner the following week. I still owe him that dinner. The house was dark. Renee's car was in the driveway. She'd made it home fine. I went inside. She was in the bedroom, lights off, already in bed. I stood in the doorway for a moment, still in my dress shirt, still smelling faintly like that restaurant and hospital-grade hand sanitizer. How is he? She asked. Stable. They're keeping him overnight. Okay, good. I changed in the bathroom, came to bed. We didn't say anything else. I lay there in the dark for a long time, staring at the ceiling, going over it. Specifically the moment she said figure it out. Not with anger. Just this flat, reasonable tone. Like it was nothing. Like the situation was a minor inconvenience and I was the one being dramatic. 19 years. I got up around 6 and drove back to the hospital, stopped at a Starbucks on the way, got my dad a plain coffee, and one of those oatmeal packets he likes, even though I always told him it tasted like wallpaper paste. He ate the whole thing. We watched the morning news together. He talked about some issue with the neighbors and their oak tree dropping branches near his fence. Normal stuff. I let him talk. Around 10 his doctor came back. Said the overnight readings were good. Still wanted to run one more test, but if things looked clear he could go home that afternoon. Dad pointed at me like he'd won something. I stayed until they discharged him around 3, helped him get settled at home, restocked his fridge from Kroger, made sure his phone was charged and his medications were where he could find them. He walked me to the door when I left and stood on the porch the way he always does, watching until I pulled out of the driveway. I got home around 6 that Saturday evening. Renee was at the kitchen table with her laptop. She looked up. Is he home? Yeah. He's good. That's a relief. She turned back to her screen. I stood there in the kitchen for a moment. Then I went upstairs, took a shower, and sat on the edge of the bed. I thought about calling her up, having the conversation then, but I wasn't ready. I needed to sit with it a little longer. Because what I'd felt the night before, standing on that sidewalk in the cold, calling Pete like a teenager who needed a ride, that wasn't just frustration. It was something that had been building for a long time, and this was just the first time it had broken the surface, somewhere I couldn't ignore it. There had been other moments, smaller ones. The year my dad had knee surgery and Renee took a girls' trip to Scottsdale the same week. The time he called our house on a Sunday afternoon, clearly lonely, and she made a face and mouth, "Don't be long," while I was still on the phone with him. The way she'd refer to his calls as your dad thing, like he was a recurring task on a to-do list. I never said anything, because what was there to say? She wasn't cruel to him directly. She was just absent, indifferent in a way that had 1,000 small explanations and no single moment I could point to. Until Friday. She came upstairs around 8. I was reading or trying to read because I kept going over the same paragraph without taking any of it in. Can we talk about the other night? She asked. Sure. She sat on the side of the bed. She had a whole thing prepared, I could tell. An explanation for why she'd reacted the way she did. Something about the difficulty of the night, the birthday dinner, the unexpected nature of the situation. She said she'd felt put on the spot. She said she'd panicked. She said she regretted how she'd handled it. I listened to all of it. Are you upset with me? She asked. I'm not sure upset is the right word, I said. Then what is it? I thought about how to say it. I wanted to be honest without being unfair because I knew I'd been carrying some of this for a long time and it wasn't right to dump it all at once. When I was standing on that sidewalk, I said, calling Pete, and Pete answered immediately without a single question. The first thing I thought was, my father would have done this for any member of your family without hesitation, and so would I. And I realized I've never once questioned whether you'd do the same for us. She was quiet. I questioned it Friday, I said, and now I can't unquestion it. I made a mistake, she said. One bad moment. That's not who I am. I know you believe that. I didn't say anything else. She waited for more, and I didn't give it to her, not because I was punishing her, but because I genuinely had nothing else to add. Some things don't resolve in a single conversation. She went back downstairs. I turned off the light. I called my dad the next morning. He was already on his back porch with his coffee, listening to the birds. He does that every morning when the weather's decent, has for as long as I can remember. He asked me how things were at home. He has good radar, my dad. Always has. Fine, I said. You sure? Working through some things. He was quiet for a second. You know what I've learned getting to be my age? What's that? People show you exactly who they are in the hard moments, not the easy ones. Anybody can be decent when things are going well. He didn't ask me anything else. I didn't offer anything. We talked about baseball for 20 minutes and then I let him go. I've thought about that a lot since. The following week, I spoke with an attorney, just to understand what things looked like, what the process involved, what I'd be walking into if I decided to walk into it. His office was quiet, a lot of diplomas on the wall. He asked me straightforward questions, and I gave him straightforward answers, and by the time I left, I had a clearer picture of what was possible. I haven't filed anything yet. I'm still thinking. But I stopped pretending I wasn't thinking about it, which feels like its own kind of honesty. A few weeks later, Renee mentioned that my father had seemed distant with her when they'd had dinner at our place. She wanted to know if I'd said something to him. I told her the truth. I hadn't said a word. She couldn't figure out how he'd picked up on it without being told. But that's the thing about people who've known you your whole life. They don't need a report. They just know. My dad called me last Thursday, early. Before 7, which is unusual even for him. He said he'd been thinking about the house. He's got about 30 years of things in that house. Furniture, my mother's china, tools in the garage he'd collected over a lifetime of fixing things himself. He wanted to talk about what happened to it all eventually. We talked for almost an hour. About the house, about what he wanted, about what mattered to him. He didn't say anything about Renee. He didn't have to. At the end of the call, before we hung up, he said, "I'm glad Pete was available that night." "Me too," I said. "Good man, Pete." "Yeah, he is." There was a pause. "You've got good instincts," he said. "Always have. Trust them." I think about my father standing on his porch every morning with his coffee, watching the birds, doing the things he's always done. He built a life that meant something. He showed up for every hard thing without being asked. He was present for my mother through 37 years of marriage and through the end of her life in a way that I watched from the outside and thought, that's what it looks like. That's the whole thing. I don't know exactly what comes next for me. Some days I'm clear on it. Other days less so. But I know this. On a Friday night in March with my father sitting alone in his recliner, wondering if something was wrong with his heart, the person who answered the phone without a single question was Pete. And the person who told me to figure it out was my wife. I'm 54 years old. I've spent a lot of years convincing myself that what I saw wasn't what I saw, that the face people showed me in the easy moments was the real one, that the other moments were the exceptions. I don't believe that anymore. My father is home. His heart is being monitored. He's back to mowing his own lawn, which drove me crazy for about a week until I realized it was keeping him going and maybe I needed to let it. He's fine. The rest of it, I'm still working out, but I know which direction I'm walking, and for the first time in a long time that feels like enough.